This video is going to walk through the installation of the P2P VPS client on a Raspberry Pi device. To get started, you should go to the GitHub repository. The most important thing is this part right here, github.com/P2P VPS. And then navigate through the directory tree to the client folder, and then the RPi, and then the simple client. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So here's the P2P VPS repository. And you can see there's 3 repositories here. This might grow with time, but the 3 main repositories, there's the client, there's the server, and then this is the server deployment. The repository of interest right now is the client. So once you go into the client, navigate into the client directory, and then there's 2 different versions of the client, one for the Raspberry Pi and one for the virtual machines, which I'll do another video on the virtual machines. And then in each of those directories are 2 different versions of that client, the simple client and the flash storage client. It might be tempting to jump straight to the flash storage client, but you should definitely install the simple client first. The flash storage is identical, except it gives you the ability to add flash storage and persistent storage and root privileges to your VPS, whereas the simple client doesn't have any persistent storage. It's mostly used for testing. So read through these directions to begin with. That's the first step. Now, before I get too far, I want to give a quick disclaimer. I'll remove this section from the video once we're past the alpha stage, but right now P2P VPS is in an open alpha test, so we're definitely encouraging people to test out the software, but beware that it's an alpha, it's rough, things will change, things will break, don't get too comfortable with it, but most importantly, feedback is welcome, and the best way to do that is to go back to the repository, make sure you're in the client repository, and then click on this issues button. And then here you can file new issues. Let's go back to these directions. And just to be clear as to what is available now and what will be coming later down the road. As of now, SSH shell access is available. That's what I'm going to show you today. Also, persistent storage is available using the Flash client, or the Flash storage version that I just showed in the repository, and that also gives sudo privileges or root privileges to the people inside the shell. And one of the features that is very important but not yet available is the serving of web pages and web apps. There's in the future there will be a subdomain that will allow you to serve web pages directly from the device. We understand how we're going to do this, but it's not implemented yet, so stay tuned for that. Okay, that's enough disclaimer. Let's head back to this these directions here. So as it says here, this is the simplest possible implementation of the client, and that's why it's good for testing and good for beginners. This whole process from the very beginning to the very end, the first time you do it, is probably going to take a couple hours because there's a lot of software that we're going to take off the Raspberry Pi, and then there's a lot of software we're going to add to the Raspberry Pi, and then it has to do a lot of compiling. So once you get this done, it's much more efficient to make a copy of the SD card if you want to program several Raspberry Pis, and each one can function independently in the marketplace and be rented out independently. So there's lots of tutorials online on how to do that, how to pull an image off the SD card and flash the image onto a new SD card for another device. But I won't cover that here. So the first thing after doing a brand new installation of Raspbian is you need to enable SSH. This is no longer enabled by default. And if you come here to the directions and click on this link, there's directions on how to do that. It's pretty simple, just a couple clicks. But until you have SSH enabled, you'll have to have a computer monitor in order to interact with the Raspberry Pi. Once you enable SSH, you can use Putty to remotely connect to the device over your local Wi-Fi and control it that way. And so that's what I'm going to show here today. And then there's also a down. If you never heard of Putty, it's just a very simple, lightweight client that lets you do SSH. SSH stands for Secure Shell. It's just a terminal. Lets you do command line as if you were sitting in front of the computer monitor. And here's a link where you can download Putty. To do that very first, from here I'm going to assume that you've turned on SSH and you can successfully get to it. The second really important thing to do is change the default password, because if you've ever heard of the term botnet or devices getting taken over and being part of a botnet, like the Raspberry Pi those are mostly IoT devices like the Raspberry Pi, and those mostly work by using the default password. And so it's very important to change your default password so that your device is not exposed and you don't become a statistic. Okay, so step 3 is fairly optional, and this will take some time, but a fresh installation of Raspbian on an 8 GB drive basically fills it up, and it doesn't leave much room for these Docker images that we're going to be building. So I recommend running each of these instructions, and they're super long. But what this does is it deletes a bunch of the software that comes on the Raspberry Pi that you're not going to need if you use it as a VPS and renting it out. A lot of stuff like the LibreOffice stuff, a lot of the programming stuff can be taken off. I put Chromium and Minecraft Pi down here separately because those seem to be pretty popular things that you might not want to delete. But so feel free to do any or all of this, and that will delete roughly a third of the stuff on the SD card. So it should free up like 2 to 3 gigabytes, which is a lot and is important. So after you do that, it's also a really good time to update and upgrade. If you wait to do the update and upgrade after you delete this stuff, then it won't, upgrade this stuff that you're about to delete. So that's why the update and upgrade comes next. These instructions install the latest version of Node, which as of right now is version 8. And version 8, it has to be version 8 or higher because the code uses a lot of modern JavaScript stuff that is only supported in version 8 or higher. Okay, so again, this is an optional thing, but if you are planning on renting your device and dedicating it to a VPS, you'll probably plug it directly into your internet connection with an Ethernet cable. And if that assumption's correct, you can go ahead and disable the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth. And that'll save power and cost, and it'll also remove a potential security vector. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do that. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore this step. Or if you plan on using the Wi-Fi instead of the Ethernet connection, obviously don't disable it. So after all that, you'll need to install Docker. So let's start walking through this. Right here, this is a copy of Putty. This is what it looks like, and I'm going to go clear everything I've been doing. So this is what it looks like when you log in. And in fact, I'm just going to figure out my IP addresses here, and I'm going to start over. So this is what Putty looks like. If you just use the default options, the window's like not very attractive. So what I like to do is I have these saved versions, but really the only difference is window appearance, and I've changed my font to Courier New and 14 point, and so that makes it just a bigger and easier to read. So what you want to do is figure out the IP address of your device, and that can be done by plugging it into a monitor and opening up a terminal window and running the ifconfig command, and or if you have your own internet, if you know how to access your own at-home network, you can pull that up and look at the list of connected devices. I won't do that right now because it's going to be different for everybody. But basically, what you want is the IP address. Once you have that and you know that SSH is turned on, the port's going to be 22. That's the default port for SSH. And then you can log in with user Pi, and then the default password is Raspberry, but I've changed my password, and so that'll log you into the shell access as if you're sitting, at a computer monitor with this command line. So let's go back to the tutorial. The first thing you're going to want to do is install Docker. Now, this device already has Docker installed, but you just copy and paste that command right in there, and that would download Docker. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and run it, but I think it's going to tell me that I already have it installed. Yeah, I'm just going to abort. This command here, this adds your user Pi to the Docker group, and that's important, but after you do this, you're going to have to log out and log back in order for that change to take effect, and that will let you run Docker PS, for example. So if you run that command and it asks you to provide a password or gives you an error, then you need to log out and log back and in order for this command to take effect, and then you should be able to do this command Docker PS, and it should just work. You can see here I'm using version 1705, and right now there's a problem with the latest version of Docker running on Raspbian. But I hope this will change. But until it changes, follow step 8 and downgrade Docker after you install it. So I like to put all so P2P VPS is a Node application, Node JavaScript. And so I like to put everything inside of a Node folder. So that's all step 9 is telling you to do. And then you're going to want to clone this repository, just like that. So again, copy and paste, and clone the repository. So there's the directory. And you want to navigate to this client rpi simple, the same directory that we're reading the instructions from, so that kind of makes sense. And oh, actually, before you do that, step 11 here, you want to go into the higher directory, just the client directory. Or just the top level directory, and do npm install. And this will install a lot of the dependencies that P2P VPS is going to need in order to run. So again, you're going to want to navigate to the client rpi simple directory and run that npm install again. Okay, so that is basically the installation. The only thing left to do is build the Docker container. But before we can do that, we need to get the device GUID, or global user ID, that is used between the server and client to identify one another. So to do that, you want to go to P2P VPS net and create an account. So I'm just going to create a test account here. Oh, yeah, that's right. Now this will send you an email, but you don't need to wait for the email. Once you have the email, you can go ahead and log in. Or once you have filled out that form, you can immediately log in. Now, the marketplace application that's coming up right now is very rough, but it is functional. So basically ignore everything that you're seeing and go navigate to the owned devices. And this is really the only functional screen right now, is this owned devices view. And now what you're going to want to do is click on this add new device button and give your device sort of a descriptive title, and so I'm just going to call this test Pi, and let's see, in fact I'm just going to hyphenate it. And the description is a great place to describe the hardware you're using. So this is a Raspberry Pi B version 3. It's running with 1 GB of RAM, quad core ARM processor. I believe that's how it's running. And then I did a speed test, and I'm on like a 25 megabit connection. This device used for testing only. So those are the only two required pieces of information. And then it's going to generate this management screen essentially. And right now the only piece of information that's really important is this. This is your GUID. This is the ID. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to go back to the directions, bring my terminal back up, and now what I need to do is edit that device config file. Everything in here should stay the same for the moment, especially if you're doing the alpha, and the only thing you need to change here is that GUID. So once that's done, you can go ahead and run the client, and this is going to build the Docker container, register your device with the server. So we'll see this go from not connected to connected. Some dummy stats are going to get uploaded here, and it's going to, once the Docker container is up and running, which is going to take a few minutes, it's going to take maybe as long as an hour to build the Docker container the first time. But then after it's built, it'll only take a few seconds to run it every subsequent time. Okay, so we're going to run the P2P VPS client. Now it's building the Docker container. This is going to take some time to build, especially the very first time you run it. But again, it won't take nearly as much time after the first time. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up until we get to the end. Okay, so the Docker container has been built, and you can see here that it displays this message that's been built and it's running. And you won't really see any more output from except for in a little while you'll get a message when the check-in, the heartbeat, or it checks the server for an expiration date, so that it knows when to shut the Docker container down and recreate it. So we'll wait a minute for that to pop up. But if you go back to the web app and refresh your screen, and then go back there, you'll see this updated information. This message will say connected, and it'll turn green, and there will be this connection information so that you can test the SSH connection. And so let's just do that while we're waiting for the expiration date check-in thing to fire. So if you put this information in, P2P VPS.net, port 6001, so I'm getting that from right here and right here, and open it up, then accept this key and the login information, and then copy the computer-generated login name and the computer-generated password. And that's it. You're now logged in to the Docker container running on the Raspberry Pi. So if we check the memory, we can see that there's about half a gig is being used, and there's about a half a gig free. With the flash drive, you can expand this by increasing the swap space, which is an important thing, but I won't cover that right now. And so you can log in, you can do things like change your password. I mean, you wouldn't want to do this, obviously, because this is the account that the person's going to use when they rent this device out. Oh yeah, so yeah, well, whatever. You can change the password. This account does not have sudo privileges, so if I try and do something like that, it's gonna give me an error. It's gonna say, yeah, it's not in the sudoers file. But again, the Flash client does have sudo privileges. So now that this is running, we can safely exit. So this is the information that will be posted up to the marketplace. And let me show you that here in a minute. Okay, so this is the message that I was waiting for, that I wanted to show you. This will fire every 2 to 10 minutes, and it's calling this function check expiration. And what it's doing is it's saying this is the time now, and this is the time where the device will reset itself. So roughly 1 hour from now, and that will get changed eventually. But this is the length of time that a person rents the device. And right now it's set for an hour. Once the code is stable, that will go to a month, because that'll be sort of the normal time to rent one of these devices, would be for a month. And the price would include that length of time. So right now that's checking in periodically, and we can go to the OpenBazaar store and check on our listing. So if you go to P2PVPS.net, back to the home page, this is the store listing. So if you copy this, if you go to the OpenBazaar client, click on that link and download the client, this is what it looks like. And then you can paste in the store address right here and open the P2P VPS store, the alpha store. And let's see. Here is the listing for the test Pi right now. So right now, because this is the alpha network and it's testing, everything is being rented by the hour, and the cost is 30 cents. And we're also testing out Bitcoin Cash here. And so you can see here's the description we added with the information, and here's the name, and here's the GUID. So that's there. It's now in the store, ready to be rented. You can safely just leave your device on the shelf, and it's there, essentially making money for you. But what happens if the power is removed? Let's fix that. If power is removed, this won't automatically reboot. So what I'm going to do is hit Control-C and shut that program down. And because Docker is running, that doesn't automatically shut down the Docker container, so you need to manually shut down the Docker container. So you can see if it's running by this docker ps command, and then we're going to go docker stop renter shell, and that will stop the shell. So that'll shut everything down. Okay, so now I want to show you how to install PM2, and this is an application that will allow you to run your node applications when the device reboots. So if power's removed and then you plug it back in, you want to have the confidence that it's just going to automatically start the software back up and get your device back on the marketplace. So the way to do that is to go sudo install and then -G for the global PM2. Misspelled that. npm install. So PM2 is installed, and now that it's installed, we can go ahead and run PM2 list. So it spawns it, and this is empty. There's no processes listed. So now let's go ahead and start the client with PM2, just like that. PM2 start. And it's important to run this program manually before you run it with PM2 so that you can see if there's any issues with the running. But once you've verified that it runs correctly, then it's safe to run with PM2. So now we can see it's been added to the list. Now what we need to do is instruct the system to allow PM2 to run as a service on startup so that it can start our application. And so you're going to do that with this command here. And what this is doing is it's adding PM2 to the path, and it's instructing systemd to run it with the same user privileges that we have. And this -HP, I can't remember what that does, but it's important on the Raspberry Pi. It makes all the difference. And yeah, that's the command you need. So that's doing a bunch of stuff, and it'll tell you that it worked, and you can freeze the processes in place with PM2 save. So if we do that, save. Okay, now, and then we can check and see if our process is still running with PM2 list. And sweet, it's running. And if you ever have any trouble in the future, you can go to your home directory by typing cd and then go into .pm2 and logs, and then these are the logs right here, so you can check the logs by going to, let's see, there's the error logs. Oops, tail command shows the very end of the command. There's nothing in there because there hasn't been any errors, so that's good. And then this is the output. This is the tail end of the output. So you can see we got this message, Docker image has been built and running. So that tells us everything's running fine. So if you have issues running the program, this is where you want to go to check the logs. I think you can also do PM2 logs. Yep, same information. Control C to exit apparently. Alright, so this is now running the P2P VPS client. The device is up on the marketplace, ready to rent. If you remove power from the Raspberry Pi, it'll automatically reboot and launch this program. And you can verify that things are running correctly by logging into your dashboard. You can see here the last time it checked in. This should update every 2 minutes. Otherwise, this will go from green to yellow and then eventually to red and say disconnected. And that's it. Your device is now earning you cryptocurrency.